and welcome to Oakville Matters. This is local television that gets to the heart of what our community is concerned about, and with us today to talk about natural capital or eco-assets, ecological assets, are Karen Brock from Oakville Green, Shelley Petrie from the Friends of the Greenbelt, and Kim Barrett from Conservation Halton. We know from long experience that one of the most important things in Oakville, and indeed in Halton, is our natural environment, our green space. I've always liked to say that you can tell when you're coming back to Oakville because the billboards go away and the trees come back. And Shelley, it seems to me that this natural capital, ecological assets, eco-assets thing could be best explained to people by starting with you, because you're one of the ones who helped bring this to us and to life. Oakville's a volunteer in a pilot study designed to spread this idea, but why don't you start us off with where it came from?
Yeah. So we all love nature. Municipalities, governments, citizens, environmental organizations work hard to protect nature, to enhance nature. Conservation authorities are stewards of nature in many of our regions and in the city of Oakville. And that's great, but we also know that we have to build things, and our cities are growing. And this is where the idea of natural assets comes in, because in the past we've always had to make these trade-offs. We love nature, but we have to build things on top of nature, and that can degrade nature. Natural asset says, well, let's look at things differently. We don't just love nature. In a more holistic way that we look at it, we have to realize the greater value that nature gives to us. Yes, it gives us beauty and enjoyment and habitat for species, but it also gives us municipal services, things like filtering water, purifying water, storing water, stormwater management in cities. A lot of that can be done by nature, and that's what this project is all about. It's sort of broadening the municipal view of what is infrastructure in our towns and cities, and saying we can build more pipes to get stormwater off our properties and off our roads, or we can also look at the natural assets in our communities, our rivers, our grasslands, our wetlands that we have, and help to restore them to optimal health and functionability so that they can actually work to mitigate our stormwater too, to handle our stormwater. And the reason why we would do this is, one, for those that love nature, it stops us from making a choice between nature and building our cities. We get both. But for municipalities, nature is more adaptable than pipes and pavement. And there's no capital cost associated with building or replacement costs associated with building this type of infrastructure. It's always there. We just need to bring it back to its raise its health level. And so for municipalities, you've got more flexible infrastructure. It doesn't have a replacement lifespan of 25 or 50 years. There's no capital cost associated with this. So there's a really good cost reason why municipalities would do this, and that's why we're here today.
So we have we're working to more than sensitize, to train staff to put asset values on nature, and this started in Gibson's in BC?
Yeah, so Canada is one full example right now of a municipality doing this, and that's in Gibson's, BC, which is an island off Vancouver, and famous for beachcombers, if anyone remembers Molly's Reach. I've been there. Had the relic breakfast. They have a reservoir. They've got they would say the cleanest water in Canada is what their residents drink. And they had a choice to make where they saw water quality degrading, and so they had a choice to make between building a treatment facility or spending more to steward the area and create more habitat so that there was less pollution running off into the water reservoir.
So enhance the ability of nature to clean the water?
Absolutely.
Versus using a scientific plant to clean the water.
And the unique thing in Gibson's was, and what all these programs require, is mostly infrastructure is relegated to one department in a municipality, as you well know, right? Your public works department. But in this case, they had to bring in, it's a multi departmental project, because when a municipality looks at saying what is the economic value, right, of putting in trees and shrubbery around that reservoir and stopping pollution versus, you know, the cost of a treatment plant, that economic value, buy-in on how we model and calculate that economic value, well, your finance head needs to agree with that economic valuation. And so it really has to bring in other departments and have their okay that this is going to work, that these analyses and these comparisons are going to work for the municipality. And so the chief administrator officer in Gibson's, you know, was really part of this. And the great thing is that their CAO and the town of Gibson's is part of this support group, this team of experience, environmental economists, scientists that are helping other municipalities like the town of Oakville now do this across Canada. So Oakville's part of this new pilot program that has 5 municipalities starting it. You're all pioneers with the town of Gibson's in moving this issue forward in Canada, and it's quite exciting.
So one of the things that attracted us was the option of spending money on the reservoir turned out to be better value than the option of building a big scientific concrete and steel and chemical water treatment plant.
Yeah.
So, and that reminded me of our approach to the canopy. We have a almost 30% urban forest canopy. So if you take a satellite shot of Oakville, there's a lot of tree canopy, and if you measure that against you know, how much of Oakville from the air is leaf and how much of it is ground or pavement, it comes out to just about 29%. In some areas it's over 50%, and in some areas it's like 17%, but it all averages out. And we have an aggressive program to increase, so that's a form of ecological capital, and we're investing a lot of money to expand it to 40%, because the Forestry Institute says 40% is the benchmark of urban forest health. And we couldn't find any other benchmark to aim at. And there certainly wasn't one that was lower, so that's the one we've embraced.
And conversations around tree canopies, right, have become really broad in the last 10, 15 years, where people aren't just talking about, you know, a tree for the sake of a tree, but the shade, the stormwater management it does, the purifying the air, exactly. And that's really, I think, a common understanding, or it's becoming a more common understanding by everyone, by municipalities, by citizens. And that's exactly, you know, what the natural asset conversation is about. And so this program is just really broadening it from the tree canopy to look at, you know, our river systems, our grasslands, our parks, our wetlands, and it's just taking that idea and broadening it and having a fuller conversation.
I think it's all interconnected too, which I think the more we all work in this area and see the concerns of urban development, it's all connected. So it's hard to tease it out, but I think the town's most recent iTree assessment was wonderful in that it gave a value to the trees, which I think is probably, well, I think it happened in 2005, but it was wonderful to see that 2 million trees can give you $3 million worth of ecological benefits for just our community alone. So I think those are exciting numbers to look at and to make the citizens aware of.
Yeah, it's really the additionality of those benefits as well. So if you have natural features providing those services, you know, a water treatment plant is great, it cleans the water, but that's what it does. If you have trees and wetlands providing that service, instead, you've got wildlife habitat, you've got flood attenuation, you have all these other additional benefits in addition to just cleaning the water.
Well, luckily, our community really values trees and green space and a clean air and the environment. And so without an idea of what the asset value of the trees was, we embarked on a 4-part program that was required in order to grow that tree canopy. We had to restrict, we had to encourage people to stop cutting trees on private property, which seemed to be happening when you would go to sell your home, and somebody who wanted to build a bigger house on your lot would buy it and say, by the way, why don't you cut all those trees down before I buy your house? So that was a frightening impact on our, sort of a loophole. Under proper development, the kind of subdivisions that go on, we can require tree planting. But in that one, in that earlier stage, it's hard to do. So we went with a private tree protection bylaw, which we've just increased the strength of. We also elected to fight the emerald ash tree borer, which has been very expensive, but we have had a lot of success in saving large ash trees with the injections, the natural injections that seem to deter the bug. And then so I mentioned three things. We make the developers plant trees, we try to save private trees, and we fight the invasive pests. But we also have to plant a lot of trees. And so Karen's group plants thousands of trees, and you're not the only ones. And we have corporate sponsors in town who, I mean, Siemens, for example, will turn out 150 people and they planted 6,000 trees themselves. But the point I'm making is that it's not free, this particular kind of capital. We have to actually invest in it, and so we've been doing that.
Yeah, and understand what we're losing too, right? When we do chop down trees, right? And so before we chop those trees down, if they've been accounted for through the iTree program, which is one of the programs that gets put into these natural capital modeling, economic modeling programs, then you know, Oakville can have a fuller picture of you know, where the trees are and the benefits that they're doing in a localized manner. And so when they're chopped down, you can see what's lost in that community and that neighborhood, and how that's going to affect, you know, either shade in that neighborhood as our summers get hotter, or, you know, at this point, stormwater, right? And you know, we're not allowed as, you know, citizens to go and dig up a stormwater pipe and, you know, throw it in the garbage, right?
Oh, actually, we have a related problem. So stormwater management has gone through 4 different generations, from practically no concept of it to and then increasing. In Oakville, you see 4 different zones, from what's stormwater to, well, we'll have a ditch, to, well, we'll have some pipes and we'll have some drains, and now we have these you know, engineered to last 1,000 years stormwater management ponds. So in the oldest part of Oakville, we've got a terrific reverse engineering catch-up. How are we going to fix this problem as climate change produces wilder and wilder weather and heavier rain? And we need to talk about stormwater, because this is an area where that's potentially incredibly expensive, and the land we don't pave over is capable of absorbing some water. I mean, it still has runoff, but impervious surfaces, it's all runoff, and creates a bigger problem.
Well, it's like on a normal day, you have to build a certain size pipe, right? A normal rainstorm, you have to build a certain size pipe to handle that rainwater. But then we're getting these more and larger storms, and they're becoming more frequent. So then you have to build bigger size pipes, and that's cost you a lot of money. If you've got a wetland that's helping you do part of that, the wetland is fine, you know, it's one size whether you're having a drought or you're having a major storm. So it's going to cost the city less to invest in that wetland and help it with its stormwater management than just to dig up areas and put in bigger size pipes.
So we've found that some people, like in some subdivisions in those 4 generations of treatment, there's swales, very shallow ditches in the back of their backyard. And they're supposed to leave them as swales. And all over Canada, people have moved into places and said to themselves, what is that for? And not asked, and filled it in, or put a pool there, or some other thing disturbing it, creating runoff that then floods their basement or their neighbors. And these have become big issues as well. And we are now looking at, and the cost of all this stormwater management is on the property tax. And that means if you're good and you're not causing the problem, you're paying for the solution of the problem. And if you're bad and you're causing the problem, you're not paying the full cost of the problem you're creating, because the good guys are helping to pay for your bad behavior.
The timing of this initiative is actually really great, because the Ministry of the Environment is in the process of updating the provincial stormwater management guidelines, and a major component of the new document that's set to be released late this year, potentially early next year, is going to be a return back to what's called low impact development. So essentially that's treating rainwater where it falls, instead of conveying it off the land as quickly as possible to a big pond. It's more about going back to what you were speaking about, of having those backyard swales, so that the water infiltrates on site and we have less runoff, less volume going to our creeks. So I think a really important component of the success of this new manual will be the education piece, and explaining to people why they're there and the purposes that they serve.
Will we be able to apply that in North Oakville, where, I mean, there's, I think half the homes, I'm not sure how many of the 20,000 homes to be built up there are built, but I think a third of them are. So there's a significant number left. Will we be able to, but the permissions have all been given from, the big settlement from years before I became mayor. This is how old this is. Because it takes a long time for growth to happen. But will we be able to go in and apply that?
Yeah, it's something, I mean, the ability to do low impact development has always been there, but the difference between the new guidelines will be that it will require low impact development techniques to be used on site. So from what I've heard, it'll be something to the effect that the first 25 millimeters of rainfall needs to be infiltrated on the site, and then you can talk about what runs off and how big of a stormwater management pond that you need to build.
I think we have to simplify it too, and
but that's
look at
great news.
Yeah, that's great news.
Great.
And I think there's an opportunity for a group like Oakville Green, and we've already worked with RAIN and Green Communities Canada, and soak up rain, trying to maximize the length of time that water stays on permeable surfaces, so that less goes into the sewer infrastructure. And there's very simple things. Rain gardens are very popular, of course, pollinator gardens, so you combine them and you've got a good combination. Disconnecting from the downpipe, downspout is also a very simple fix. So I think we have to, our job would be to help citizens understand how they can have an impact right in their own backyard for economic benefits, not just for the city, but also for the family. Who doesn't want to have free water for their garden, when you can run the hose pipe off your rain barrel.
And once you've costed out, what our natural assets are contributing economically to the infrastructure in our city, you can reward those, that have disconnected their downspouts, for example, and are treating their rainwater on site, and because they're now part of the infrastructure. That's recognized in the financial planning of the city as part of the infrastructure.
Well, let's talk about that. A number of municipalities, not us yet, have implemented basically stormwater management charges. They've taken it off of the property tax and turned it into a user fee, basically, and they set the fee by how much of your property can absorb water, or put another way, how much of your property is impermeable because it's paved over. And the more you pave, the more you pay. It's happened in Waterloo, and Peel is implementing it. Yep. And we've been studying it for a number of years. No matter whenever you change any fee, there's a segment of society, a large segment, I'd say 40–50%, that go, it's a new cash grab. Yeah. And so the communicating of it is a challenge. But Karen, you're an Oakville resident, and Kim, I think, are you in Burlington?
I'm in Hamilton.
Hamilton? Mm-hmm. So, but all three of you pay property taxes somewhere, either in rent or direct. How do you feel about these fees? Why not, as you're the Oakville voter, why don't you go first?
I get to go first. I don't know. I guess fee for service. I guess in the same way that we pay for our electricity, and the same way that we pay for the water that we use, and the subsequent stormwater.
So if we take
use.
off your property tax, the stormwater management, and then I have very little permeable surface because I'm trying to be good, but had I one of these, there's all kinds of places in Oakville where people have paved every inch.
Right.
Because they don't want to cut.
It's a cultural aesthetic too.
And they don't want to cut the grass.
A pool and hardscaping, yeah. So
So
sure.
the hardscapers would see an increase in their total cost of ownership. Their property tax would go down, but their stormwater fee would go up, would arrive, and it would be more than the savings on the property tax. But you who are good, you would get a net gain. You'd be incentivized in theory. How do you feel about this? I mean, we would not be the first.
It's never popular when you say we're going to charge you more. But I mean, we're stepping into a new century with issues that we've never dealt with before. So
in Waterloo, this is 10 years old. They've survived it. Peel's a little newer. I don't know how it's going to go.
If you look at the bigger picture, though, we're having storms now that are causing millions of dollars in flood damage, like hundreds of millions of dollars in flood damage in a 24-hour cycle. Roads being washed out, bridges being washed out.
Well, we had 3,000 homes underwater just next door.
Homes are underwater.
2 years ago.
How much do cities pay out in basement flooding to help homeowners, right? Because the stormwater management system in that neighborhood doesn't work. And that's why
it cost us millions.
Yeah. So if you take all of that into consideration, and and the city has a bigger plan, not just a backyard plan for homeowners, but a bigger plan at how they look at shifting their stormwater management to partially natural asset based, then in the long run, are you really paying more as a homeowner, or are you helping to keep your property taxes low over as the years click by? Because climate change is only going to make, and every municipality we know is exceptionally concerned about this point, that it is driving up the cost of infrastructure. Infrastructure is just getting more expensive as is. There are huge deficits we know in this country that the feds are trying to deal with, but the costs from climate change are just going to escalate everything, and we actually need a new way as municipalities to approach how we handle our infrastructure, and nature is going to provide, part of that answer. And I come from Toronto. Any scrap of green space we want to protect. So the other thing I like about this is it means that even as cities intensify, they can still have the conversation about, well, let's not let go of our green space, because it does more than just let me take my dog for a walk or my kids to the park, right? It helps the city run itself, and helps the city deliver infrastructure.
We're not nearly as paved over as Toronto, but we're 1,000 times more frantic about saving green space in Oakville, and to a degree in Halton. I mean, you see that at Conservation Halton, yes, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think when you look at environment and economics, they do go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive. And I think when you look at any man-made or engineered infrastructure, they depreciate, whereas nature does not depreciate, and in fact can, accrue greater value over the years. So I think it's important to look at it in those terms, too.
I'm worried about this idea that we think nature's free. I don't believe it's free. I believe that stewarding nature costs money. I believe that planting trees, nature destroys trees all by herself with disease and lightning strikes and bugs. And so there's all kinds of costs to us to keep nature strong and working for us. So it's not free capital. I think the reservoir story in Gibson's is a really good story, because what it shows is they could choose between this lower cost or that higher cost, but they weren't choosing between spending and free. And I worry, as a mayor, I worry all the time about the number of people who believe in magic. because I haven't found any magic yet.
I heard a great quote at a conference a few years ago that was, we use nature because it's valuable, but we lose it because it's free. And it really points to this need to move to a full cost accounting model where all those externalities and impacts on natural features are accounted for financially, because we're not really doing that right now. And I think that's where you say there's a loss that's just not recognized.
It's very helpful. One of the best things I've heard. I'm going to take that. I'm going to modify it. I'm going to modify it. I'm going to use it. I say I'm going to make it because we think it's free.
Exactly.
You know, because we've got to get our heads around. I mean, one of the greatest paradoxes of life in a desirable place like Halton and Oakville, and Burlington, Milton, and Halton Hills, you have 4 of the most desirable places to live in the country. Burlington is considered to be the second best place to live in money sense this year, and Ottawa's number 1 and Oakville's number 3. They're both cities and we're a town, so we're the best town to live in. But it's because we're so green, it's because we value nature. And so there's another paradox, never mind the paradox of the commons, sometimes called the tragedy of the commons. The more we make ourselves attractive, the more people want to move here. And the greater the pressure is in terms of growth.
And I work at the Greenbelt Foundation, right? So this project's really interesting because, one, the Greenbelt has the headwaters of the rivers that all flow down into our cities like Oakville.
Except for the headwaters of the creeks that come down in Ajax. I'm in strong support of Mayor Parrish's effort to get those added to the Greenbelt, and we're frustrated because it doesn't look like they won't say why, but they're not acting to add those headwaters. But keep going.
Well, and the Greenbelt, we know because a large percentage of it is agricultural land, that it has a food value, to this region and to the country. It also has an environmental value to it, and we've done reports in the past. David Suzuki Foundation's done a report in the past to show that its natural assets are worth $2.6 billion, and we're redoing that study right now. But what we're also seeing as the Greenbelt is being reviewed is that there's all these development applications, like 600 of them, to take parcels of land out of the Greenbelt. There's a huge concentration of those requests to take out that are just along those headwaters that feed into the river valleys.
In Halton, there's like an astonishing number in a little corner of Halton, the sort of southwest corner of Burlington. Just an astonishing, if you put red dots on the Greenbelt, it looks like it's got measles really badly right there.
And we need to, those are, and Kim, I think you would recognize this, right? Those are the tops of our streams. Being able to contain stormwater there, and so not develop it, but keep it as a piece of natural infrastructure, is really going to limit what comes down our river systems in a storm. And that they're also providing the base flow, which is your clean water into our river system too. So they're extremely important areas.
That's a really good point to end on, because we've just run out of time. You can find more information on that at the Friends of the Greenbelt website, and I really do hope that you'll redouble your commitment to the green infrastructure of our community. Thanks for being with us.